All right. I think we're going. Welcome back to another one of these things. Maybe at some point I'll probably just stop saying, all right, I think we're going, because that's really just a way for me to say something that I don't care if it like clips out or I start talking too soon or something. I didn't mean to scratch my desk. Um, yeah, so welcome back to another Just Chatting edition of Just Chatting, I suppose you could say. Hope you're doing great. Today was a day, I suppose, not as like meeting packed as yesterday, but still a fair number of the meetings. Wish I was actually being able to help out some people with some problems they're having at work right now. But hopefully more of that next week. First week was kind of like help people get stuff ready. This week was just like talk to a lot of people. Hopefully next week we'll go back to help get things done. That'd be pretty awesome. But yeah, things to talk about today. So maybe like in the vein of like I was grabbing like video game characters off of the shelf and talking about them a little bit. I won't do that today, but I did kind of want to talk about a game that I've been playing recently, or have played recently. There are a few that I'll probably just want to talk about. I've always kind of wanted to do something like I'll play a game and then I'll have like immediate thoughts about it that I want to share, and I always want to like write them down and do like some like blog post or something. But I never like convince myself to do that, and I usually just end up talking with somebody I'm around with, be like a friend or a family member or something. Just be like, hey, I just have some ideas about this game I just played. I want to talk about it. So if talking about it is just how I function, then we'll do that here. It'll be a way for me to kind of realize that dream of playing a game, thinking about it, having some ideas, and just talking about it a little bit. So, had a couple of games that I played over the holiday thanks to the Steam sale. It's like I only sign into my Steam account like twice a year these days, and I shouldn't say that. I sign in for the first time in a while every like 6 months ish, like summer sale, winter sale, and then I'll sign in a few more times to play some of the games that I bought. But one of them that I picked up was Ikenfell, and I'd been kind of interested in this game for a bit. I remember seeing some advertisement for it. It might have been like some like one of the like game devs or something that I follow on Twitter, just like talking about like how they were excited for the game or something. I'm pretty sure that was how I ended up like seeing it for the first time, and I'm like, oh neat, it's like it's kind of like a wizarding school type thing, and I kind of dug like the character design, so I was like, let's actually like keep tabs on this one. So it did end up coming out this year, or last year, sorry, we're in 2021 now. Woo. And I guess at this point I'll probably say spoilers ahead. So if you do want to play the game, experience it in its entirety, I'll do my best not to like talk too much about like super spoilery things, but we'll be talking about some like the characters and who they are and things like that here. That said, so you're a character who comes to a wizarding school in search of your sister. She's missing for some reason, and you're not a magical person. But when you get within range of the school, you end up getting magical powers, and you're allowed in through the school by the characters that are guarding it. And as you go through, you meet a bunch of characters, and you're kind of building your team over time. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this is that as soon as you meet a character, it does a really good job with pronouns, or hear about a character. So, and nobody questions that. There's one cutscene in the game where it's like like somebody misjudges a character. They say once like that it makes them uncomfortable. They want to be called this, and that's fine. And they're like, sorry, I didn't mean that, on like both accounts. One for being a jerk, and one for not addressing you as you would prefer, which I think is really cool. It's a really nice normalization of just where we're at in understanding how people identify and how people want to be addressed. That's something that we should all start getting just better at. And it felt like a good game to be introduced to, like, how people would like to be addressed, without getting into any background of that character. That was another aspect of the normalization of these characters too. They never have to describe. They're never asked to describe, like, why they're using they them pronouns, or they're using just they're identifying in some other way. There's nothing that's saying, you're weird, tell me why you're weird. So it does a really good job of taking that concept and normalizing it, because especially in a Wizarding Academy type setting, you're almost expecting there is an expectation that the characters you find here are going to be weird in some way. They're not, like, normal, which might be, like, kind of a subtle underpinning there. It's understanding that people that you meet may not be like what you expect, might not be your normal, that, like, they're experiencing their own normal, and we should respect that. People should respect and understand that. So, like, kudos all around for like the ability, or just, like, creating a story that doesn't play that up, but makes it a very, like, it's still an anchor to the story. You know that you're being introduced to a bunch of characters that fit certain like gender norms and just different ways of identifying themselves. But that's not, like, you're here because it's a cool wizarding school, and these characters have just a bunch of abilities and stuff that are interesting in and of themselves. What's kind of a trade-off that happened there, I feel, though, is the normalization of the characters, showing that just because they're non-binary, gender non-conforming, using pronouns that you wouldn't potentially expect just by, like, looking at the character, by normalizing that, they don't actually go into too much character depth for, like, why this character, like, has book magic or glass magic or paint magic, which is, I feel, a little bit of a letdown, because there were so many times in the story where I'm just like, I might use this character more if I understood, like, why or how a character becomes affiliated with a certain, or maybe not affiliated, but, like, they get an affinity for a certain type of magic. Like, your character that you play as ends up with fire magic, and she doesn't do any other kind of magic along the way. So it's not like other wizarding school type things where you're like, everybody learns the same wide array of magic. It's, you have one specific type of magic, but you're learning other things like alchemy and stuff like that. But then there's also one character in the game, the first one that you meet, that joins your party, like, their thing is just potion making. So it's kind of weird that you have people who are magically inclined, but doing one of the things that everybody else is taking classes in, but nobody else can take classes in paint magic or glass magic or fire magic, which in the main character's case, fire magic is, like, new. People are like, what are you doing? Nobody on the planet has fire magic. We haven't seen fire magic in centuries. Plot relevance later. But because of that normalization of the character is not weird for how they identify, it doesn't really explore why they also do this really cool thing. So it could also be interpreted, like, as I think about it, it can be interpreted as, it doesn't matter what type of magic you end up using. That doesn't matter. That is a part of your identity, and it's how you, like, present your magic. You don't have to ask questions about it. People just have to understand that you do glass magic, which has a really strong like tie to like the second character you meet. They go by they them pronouns. You don't have to ask why when they first say that, or you first see them identify as that. That's it. You don't have to ask. So I can see why it fits into that kind of normalization narrative. Like the game wants to make this type of thing very clear, that it's how you identify yourself, even like as a metaphor with how your magic physically manifests itself. That you don't have to go into the history of why you do that or how you got that magic. But at the same time, like, because it's unique, and I'm so used to like people going into it, it's like, how did they do that? How does this magic system work? It was kind of a weird clash in my head. Like, I could get the social normalization part, but I really wanted to learn more about this universe's magic system. But it kind of falls a little flat with that. Not that it really detracts from how cool the magic looks or like behaves or the actual battling. I think it does a fantastic job with all of that. But like I really like those kinds of story aspects, and like digging into the lore of a game's universe. Games that I can just kind of explore and understand they just really stand out to me, and I really wanted this universe to be like that. But I'd probably have to go look up things outside of the game to get an understanding for that. What's interesting though is, this is a topic for another thing, but I also really like games where like the villain or the perceived villain is understandable even if you don't like them. Like, one of my favorite villains in a game is Handsome Jack from Borderlands 2 and Borderlands the pre-sequel. But that's like a thing I could talk about for a long time. So I won't do that here. But because all of the characters in your party have this sort of, we don't talk about our magic or how we came to be where we are, you get a lot more of that for the people who aren't in your party. So you actually learn quite a bit about the main like perceived antagonist, the person who's the antagonist up until like the very end of the game. It's not like a villain and puppet master thing. It's just the villain is misunderstood or has a misunderstanding about the world, and like at the very end they do something that causes another character to do something else. A lot of cause and effect there. But leading up to that, you get to understand a lot more about this character that you're trying to defeat than you really do about any of the characters outside of like the main character. And even then, I think you know more about her sister, the one you're trying to find this whole game, than you do about her even. So like, while the game like designed these fantastic characters that I want to learn more about, I feel like it didn't really go into much depth about who these characters are, what their stories are. Instead, sort of having that normalization narrative or like implication within your party, and then everything outside of the party can get like that character in-depthness. So I tried to do two things at once that kind of clashed a little, but like it still did a really great job with the story. The overall story was fantastic. I enjoyed that thoroughly. It's just I wish I could know more or walk away from the game knowing more about the characters in your party, like as much as I knew about the main antagonist. I felt there was a lot of room for that didn't really happen. You get to see a lot of how they act in the now, without really knowing how they got to where they are. There's a couple exceptions. It's just most of the characters don't get that treatment at all. But yeah, it kind of just feelings there. but yeah, I think it did a really, really fantastic job with like bringing that gender identity like to the forefront. Like with each character you meet, they're all identifying in different ways essentially. So it's almost like a tutorial for new social norms, and it's fun along the way. So it's probably a little weird to people who are a little new to that, but at the same time, it's a very helpful experience for people who are new to it and are open minded and just good people. But it does lack a little bit in like actually going into depth about these characters, because it is sort of normalizing those aspects of things. Like you don't have to pry into people to understand who they are currently, but at the same time, like I really like kind of having that background about the universe and the characters, and it's hard to do that when your kind of view into the magic system is through the characters that you won't ever go into depth with. Still great storyline. Thought the music was pretty good too, and it just looked nice too. This is just a good all around game. So I definitely recommend it if you like. Kind of it's still a turn based RPG. Levels all cap at 30. So I think I was grinding a little too much and hit 30 before the last dungeon. So I got to just kind of skip a lot of battles in the last area, but I think it kind of made the story kind of speed up a little bit, which was nice. Like all the story stuff was great. The battle stuff could get a little monotonous, like more design mechanic-y. Like at the beginning of the game, I felt that it expected you to go back to previous areas to grind, and I'm not a huge fan of when RPGs do that. Like unless you're doing like a Metroidvania type game too, where you foster going back to look for things or find things that you couldn't otherwise reach before, but the game didn't offer that. So you progress the story until you hit a point. There's a boss that you fight that's just like, this is really hard compared to everything else I've done. And then it's like, oh yeah, people recommend that you're like 3 levels higher than you actually are at that point, even if you did all of the battles going up to that point. So that was like my one major gripe. After that, after the first chapter, like I didn't really experience that for the rest of the game. And I will admit that when I didn't want to like do that backtracking grind, the game does offer an accessibility feature for like auto victory, which doesn't penalize you from like an experience standpoint. So if you actually play through the fight or you just do the auto victory, you still get the same experience. It just immediately ends the fight that you're in. So that made it like made me be able to get over that hurdle. When I discovered that, I'm like, oh, so if I ever do come across this again, like I can do this if I'm like bored fighting the same enemies over and over again. So it's good that that's there as sort of a console command for just getting more experience, but that's effectively just what it was. And the combat itself is like nice. It's still like it's like when I say it's turn-based RPG, it does still fall in the vein of like Paper Mario, where you have like an action timing that you can do to do more damage or take less damage. Maybe one of my gripes there too is that it is a requirement. You're not going to do enough damage and you're going to take too much damage if you're not hitting the action commands at least at a good level. Like they have a good and an excellent and a miss. And if you get that miss, you don't use the action commands, the game is effectively not beatable. So you have to, it doesn't get you through faster. Getting those goods is required. Getting those excellent levels are preferred. So you're still going to have a hard time if you're hitting nothing but goods. I learned that after the first chapter. So if you like those kinds of things, I don't want to call them quick time events because it really is just basically single button press at the right time for those abilities. if you like the story, that auto victory is a fantastic feature for people who just want to experience the story. Like I said, the characters are all pretty neat. I enjoyed like how they like all the sprite work and how they generally interacted with each other. It's just I wish I had a little bit more depth in there. But then again, I just really like lore, so that's just a me thing. But yeah, I definitely recommend it. If you like those turn-based RPGs, action timing, battle stuff, good character design. Just like don't expect to know too much about the magic system other than like main plot related stuff that doesn't really delve into like the system itself, but a sort of changing of hands of the system at play, which makes me want to learn even more, frankly. But that's not going to be in the game. But characters good, story arc good, battle system good, good, frankly. Anyway, I think we'll call it that. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep reiterating the things that I already said. So, yeah. We'll come back to this next week. Not this particular conversation. Probably another one. Unless I think of more stuff I want to say about this game. Yeah. Have a wonderful weekend. And we'll catch you on Monday. See ya.